They mocked him. They actually laughed at him. In 2018, a 22-year-old idol walked into one of the most rundown, forgotten corners of Seoul and did something that made people online shake their heads in disbelief. He didn't buy a penthouse. He didn't buy a mansion. He bought an old, worn-out apartment unit in a low-rise complex that critics called outdated, unfashionable, and honestly, kind of embarrassing for someone at the peak of global fame. Social media users questioned his judgment. Some said it was a waste of money. Others straight up called it a bad investment. That 22-year-old was Jimin of BTS. And what happened next is the kind of story that sounds too wild to be real, except every single part of it is documented, verified, and now in 2026, completely blowing up online. Because that so-called bad investment just turned into one of the most jaw-dropping real estate wins in South Korean celebrity history, and ARMY is absolutely losing their minds over right now. Let's rewind to 2018 for a second, because you need to understand just how strange this decision looked at the time. BTS was already a global phenomenon. Jimin could have bought literally anything. Any high-rise, any glossy new development, any flashy address that would scream success. Instead, he set his sights on Bampo Jeogong Complex, a building that had been standing since 1973. Let that sink in for a second. 1973. This wasn't some sleek, modern tower with floor-to-ceiling windows and marble lobbies. This was an aging, low-rise apartment block, the kind of building people usually associate with nostalgia, not luxury. It had no elevators in some sections, outdated wiring, cracked walls, the whole picture of a relic from a different era of Seoul. And that's exactly why people didn't get it. Fans and critics alike were confused. Why would one of the most successful young stars on the planet, someone at the absolute peak of his career, choose to put his money into something that looked, on the surface, like a downgrade? There were comments calling it a strange choice. There were jokes about how even his own fans couldn't understand the logic. Some outlets even framed it as a quirky, slightly puzzling move from a celebrity who could afford so much more. But here's the thing about real vision. It doesn't always look impressive in the moment. Sometimes the smartest decisions in the world look like mistakes until years later when the picture finally becomes clear. And that's exactly what happened here. Because Jimin wasn't just buying an apartment. He was buying land. He was buying location. He was buying rights. And most importantly, he was buying into the future of one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in South Korea. See, Bampo Jeogong Complex sits in an area that anyone who knows Seoul real estate will immediately recognize as gold. It's positioned with access to the Han River, one of the most sought-after natural landmarks running straight through the capital. Properties with river views in this part of the city are some of the most expensive and desirable in the entire country. But back in 2018, this particular complex hadn't been touched by modern redevelopment yet. It was old. It was aging. It was, in the eyes of most people, past its prime. What almost nobody clocked at the time was that these old, low-rise Seoul apartment complexes are often prime candidates for what's called reconstruction projects. In South Korea, aging apartment complexes sitting on valuable land frequently get torn down and completely rebuilt into massive, ultra-modern developments. And when that happens, the original owners of the units don't just lose their property, they gain rights. Rights to a brand new unit in the redevelopment. Rights tied to the value of the land itself, which, especially in a location like this, appreciates dramatically over time. This is the part that separates casual buyers from strategic ones. Jimin didn't just purchase 4 walls and a roof. According to reports circulating widely right now, he secured the property specifically for its land value and its future reconstruction rights. In other words, he wasn't paying for what the building was. He was paying for what the land underneath it was destined to become. And in 2026, that bet has paid off in a way that even the most confident investor probably couldn't have predicted with this level of success. Because right now, that exact same complex, the one people mocked him for buying, is in the final stages of transforming into what's being described as one of the most luxurious apartment developments in all of Korea. The project has an official name, H-Class T, and it's being built by Hyundai Engineering and Construction, one of the biggest and most respected names in the industry. This isn't some small local development. This is a massive high-end mega project, and the scale of it is honestly kind of insane when you break it down. We're talking about a development that will stand 35 floors high once it's completed, with unobstructed front-row views of the Han River. If you know anything about Seoul property, you know that a river view alone can add a massive premium to a place's value. But this development goes so far beyond just the view. Picture this: a bowling alley with 8 full lanes right inside the residential complex, a table tennis room, a billiards room, not one, but 3 indoor golf simulator ranges, including one designed for actual driving practice with a range reaching over 30 meters, complete with screen golf and a full golf zone setup. If that's not enough, there are also 3 indoor tennis courts and 1 full outdoor tennis court. A fully equipped basketball court sits inside the fitness gym area alongside a full workout facility. There's a dedicated climbing wall for residents who want something more extreme. A multi-purpose auditorium seating 300 people doubles as both a movie theater and event space for residents. And if you're imagining this as starting to sound like a 5-star resort instead of an apartment building, you're not wrong, because it also includes multiple private lounges, exclusive men's lounges, 2 separate sky lounges positioned high above the city, an instrument practice room, and even personal studio spaces available to residents. This is not a normal apartment complex. This is being built and marketed as one of the most amenity-packed, ultra-premium residential developments in the entire country. And Jimin secured his stake in this exact property back when it was still an aging, low-rise building that most people wouldn't have looked twice at. Now, let's talk numbers, because this is where the story goes from impressive to genuinely stunning. Reports estimate that the property Jimin acquired back in 2018 was valued at around 4 billion won at the time of his investment. 4 billion won. Now, with the complex transforming into this ultra-luxury, high-end mega development, the value of that same property is being reported as having the potential to triple or even exceed that once the reconstruction is fully completed and the new units are finished. We're talking about a jump into the millions of dollars in value, all stemming from a single decision made when he was just 22 years old. Think about that timeline for a second. 22 years old, at an age where most people are still figuring out their first apartment lease or their first car payment, Jimin was already thinking multiple steps ahead, positioning himself not for short-term flash, but for long-term, generational-level financial growth. And he did it quietly. He didn't announce it as some big business move. He didn't frame it as a genius investment strategy. He simply made the purchase, absorbed the criticism and confusion that came with it, and let time do what time does best, reveal the truth. And now, in 2026, that truth is out, and it is spreading across social media like wildfire. Fan accounts and financial commentary pages have been breaking down the story piece by piece, and the reaction has been explosive. People are calling it visionary. People are calling it one of the smartest celebrity real estate moves they've ever seen. Comments are flooding in with fans expressing shock that a 22-year-old had the foresight to see value where everyone else saw an outdated, forgettable building. There's something almost poetic about this whole story, too. Back in 2018, the narrative around this purchase was framed almost entirely around confusion and mild embarrassment. People genuinely felt like he had made a strange call. Some fans even tried to defend the decision without fully understanding why he'd made it, simply trusting that he probably had his reasons. And it turns out, he absolutely did. By the time this development is expected to be fully completed, some reports point to the finishing stages wrapping up around 2027, Jimin will reportedly be able to move into a brand new, ultra-modern residence inside one of the most exclusive addresses in the country, a place with sweeping Han River views, resort-level amenities, and a level of prestige that very few properties in Korea can match. And the wildest part is, He'll be living there not because he bought into luxury at the top of the market, but because he recognized potential value at the very bottom of it, years before anyone else saw what was coming. This is the kind of story that completely reframes how people look at his decision-making. It's easy to admire someone for spending big on something flashy and immediate. It's a whole different level of impressive to admire someone for making a quiet, calculated, unglamorous choice that takes years to reveal its full brilliance. This wasn't about impressing anyone in the moment. This was a long game, and he played it perfectly. And honestly, when you zoom out, this story says a lot about who Jimin is beyond the stage. Fans have always talked about his work ethic, his perfectionism, the way he approaches everything with intense focus and discipline. This property story adds a completely different dimension to that reputation. It shows a level of patience and strategic thinking that isn't about instant gratification. It's about understanding value before the rest of the world catches up to it. Of course, the internet being the internet, this story has sparked massive conversation. Some are pointing out how this mirrors bigger patterns in Seoul's real estate market, where old, undervalued properties in prime locations often become the biggest financial winners once redevelopment kicks in. Others are simply in awe that someone so young, already juggling a demanding global career, a rigorous performance schedule, and constant public scrutiny, still found the clarity to make a financial decision like this and stick with it for years without flinching, even while facing public confusion and criticism. And that's honestly the part that hits hardest. He didn't need validation in the moment. He didn't need everyone to understand the move right away. He trusted the process, and 8 years later, the results are speaking louder than any explanation ever could. So now, in 2026, as construction on this massive luxury development nears its final stages, the story of Jimin's 22-year-old real estate gamble is being rediscovered, retold, and celebrated all over again. What started as an old, criticized purchase in a rundown apartment complex is on the verge of becoming one of the most valuable, most talked about properties tied to any K-pop idol, and possibly one of the most impressive personal investment stories in the industry, period. It's wild to think that this entire transformation from mockery to millions, from an outdated 1973 building to a 35-floor luxury tower with bowling alleys, golf ranges, and private sky lounges, all traces back to one quiet, confident decision made by a 22-year-old who saw something nobody else could see. And if there's one thing this story proves beyond any doubt, it's that Jimin's ability to look past the noise, ignore the criticism, and trust his own vision isn't just something that shows up on stage. It's part of who he is in every part of his life, and this story might just be the clearest proof of that yet.